Hello and namaste from Ramayana Decoded. This is Ravi Nahar, and today's presentation is on awakening the Kundalini, the sleeping serpent. The Kundalini is a very fascinating and very misunderstood, like a lot of Vedic terms in modern day culture. Kundalini is something that people claim to practice and has an own kind of method and system and branding around certain yoga schools and yoga groups that promote Kundalini yoga. And there are many people that I've come across personally as well as over social media, who claim that they have awakened their Kundalini and are experiencing um, spiritual experiences. And that is true in some respects, but also not so true in other respects. And what I'm going to do today is go through what Kundalini is, as per Vedic literature and yoga science, and how you can potentially start the initial processes of awakening the Kundalini. And as always, because this is Ramayana Decoded, I will be referring back to the Ramayana particularly, and also to the Mahabharata, two of India's greatest spiritual epics. So you can find Remind Decoded on all these social media platforms. Thinktree is our partner, where our courses are go for accreditation for UK continued professional development points. And these are all the offerings that we offer for free, except for the Kriya Yoga meditation lessons. They are available through Thinktree, but also available to you via donation only to our PayPal account. And there's YouTube. You have access to our weekly 30-minute live webinar sessions, first come, first served basis in terms of access links. And then also I will have my book, which will originally come in a digital forum towards the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, and also the WhatsApp group. The WhatsApp group is really only for people who are taking the lessons, excuse me, the Kriya Yoga lessons. Okay, so that bit over. So the Kula Kundalini, what is the Kundalini, and what do we actually mean by raising the Kundalini, and how do we do that? Those would be some of the questions that I try to answer for you in this short presentation. So in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, two of the characters which represent Kundalini is Sita in the Ramayana, and over here she's sitting in the Ashok Vatika and in Lanka, which is also known as um, the Mooladhara Chakra, the lowest center of consciousness. And over here is Draupadi, and she represents the Kundalini in the Mahabharata written by Rishi Vyas, and obviously the Ramayana written by Valmiki. And the picture in the middle here is showing the spine and the Ida in the Pingala going spiraling around the spine, which is also known as the Sushamna, the astral spine, and up from the Mooladhara Chakra here, which is where Sita sits in Ravan's kingdom of Lanka and the Shokvatika, representing the Kundalini, which then ultimately rises up through the Shushamna and into the Agna Chakra. That's there, the medulla. On the other side would be the the um, the Agna Chakra, the center of consciousness, or the third eye. So that's a little bit around in terms of where the Kundalini is associated to in terms of symbology in the epics of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Now, the Kundalini itself, there are different forms of Kundalini, which again, a lot of people don't really know about and talk about. I'm going to touch upon that towards the end of the presentation in a little bit more detail. But Kundalini is really a universal Shakti, a universal force. And Sita and Draupadi, particularly Sita in this case, I want to focus on, is a drop of that universal Shakti or this universal Kundalini. So, what happens when When a particular soul sits inside the cell, um, uh, uh, when the sperm and the ovum unite, what happens is there's a spark of light in the astral world. And this spark of light in the astral world attracts souls like me and you of similar karmic frequencies towards that particular opening. And many souls will rush towards this opening as a result of astral and physical karam, desires and likes, and unfinished business in the physical world. And maybe one, sometimes two, in some cases more than two, of these souls will sit within that primeval, the original cell, formed by the sperm and the ovum uniting. Now, what happens at that point? The Kundalini Shakti, which is a drop of the universal Shakti, starts to create the human form within the mother's womb. And it starts off by creating first the brain. And what happens is that the cell goes through what we call mitosis. It divides and splits and divides and splits until eventually, and I can't remember the exact number, but a few weeks, maybe up to a month or longer, what happens is the Kundalini then starts to create the brain. With the brain, the central nervous system, and she starts over here. And slowly, slowly, she starts working her way downwards, creating the spine with all the various nerves and the tissues and the organs. And she slowly, slowly comes down, creating the human form within the womb until she sits over here in the Mooladhara Chakra at the base of the spine, also known as Lanka, with her held, as Sita was, held down, and she's captured by delusion, she's captured by Maya, and she sits there until Ram, your consciousness, your pure spirit consciousness, awakens the Kundalini and she starts to rise up again through the various chakras, the various centers of consciousness, till eventually she goes back to Ayodhya, which represents the Agna Chakra. So I'd mentioned there that the Kundalini is a drop of this Shakti. As we know, Shiva and Shakti go together. And this universal Kundalini, as I said, is a drop of this universal Shakti, which creates the whole of the human body inside. Now, what happens is that when the Kundalini is within the womb and it's creating the human form, as she slowly, slowly begins to create the human form, she's attracted to the magnetism of Maya on the outside. And this happens as a result of your karam, which is being attracted towards certain desires and actions. And there's this huge magnetic pull from the outside world and the external world, particularly through your mother. And what happens is that the Kundalini then begins to become deluded until eventually she becomes totally captured by Maya, or what we can name as Ravana or dasana, which is basically 10 karamindriyas and 10 indriyas, 10, five senses, sorry, five karamindriyas, five indriyas, and there is the five senses and the five actions under the control of Maya, which captures the Kundalini. And in the Ramayana, it's the golden deer, Maricha, who represents the Maya or cosmic Maya or universal Maya. And Maya itself consists of time, it consists of space, it consists of atom. So the atom itself is also known as individual ignorance or individual delusion. And then the fourth component of Maya is the sound of Om, the the original sound which creates vibration of everything. And the Kundalini itself, in terms of what it actually is a very, very subtle energy which consists of vibratory intelligent light and sound. That's how I would describe it. That's the only way I can really describe it. And it's very, very subtle. It's like 1,000 times more subtle than a hair thread. So it's very, very subtle. And it sits at the bottom of your spine, but it sits there with what we call potential energy, like a spring, ready to be pulled up into the Sushamana and up into the Agna Chakra. And so long as the Kundalini is asleep, you are awake to the delusion. But once the Kundalini begins to awake, you start sleeping or falling asleep within the Maya and awakening in a different dimension. Now, this is one of the reasons why some people that you come across who are in this process on the spiritual path and have through various other lifetimes and in the current lifetime practice certain techniques which awakens the Kundalini, and your whole perception of life around you, your relationships, your the way you think about yourself internally, everything begins to change, and you start seeing things, you start seeing situations, and you start seeing people from a very different angle. That is the beginnings of a Kundalini awakening. Now, there are some people who also go to the extreme that, you know, my Kundalini has awakened and I'm spiritual and I'm going through mental depression, anxiety, stress, because this is all associated to the Kundalini awakening. And there's lots of YouTube videos around people who try to link, stress, anxiety, depression to Kundalini awakening. It's not entirely true. um, there could be some truth within that, but overall I can tell you that does not happen. The Kundalini, basically what it does is that you do tend to shut off from the rest of the world. You do start seeing things in a totally particular way. Your circle of friends could change. Your whole perception in life can change. You ultimately do become more spiritual. And then, of course, there is this whole thing about a spiritual human being. What is a spiritual human being? A spiritual human being is not someone who wears a turban or has a beard or has a particular type of traditional look where they could be considered to be religious or enlightened. A spiritual human being is just any ordinary person who sees life from a totally different angle. Ultimately, in my opinion, everybody is spiritual, but at a different level of or a different development of spirituality. So that's basically what the Kundalini is. And with regards to Kundalini awakening, you can't just accidentally awaken the Kundalini. One of my points down here is about the Granthis in the Valmiki Ramayana. Now, the Granthis represent safety mechanisms. Now, imagine this particular form of energy known as the Kundalini, which creates the human body inside the mother's womb, creates a piece of machinery, because ultimately that's what it is. It's a piece of clothing that your consciousness sits within. That's all it basically is. Your body is a piece of clothing that your consciousness sits within, and then your consciousness, your Rama consciousness, becomes so identified to this particular body that it becomes lost in the jungle of the spine, of the peripheral nervous system, and of the central nervous system. I'm going to just quickly go back to this picture over here. When I talk about the spine and the jungle, if you take the peripheral nervous system of the human body and turn it upside down, it looks like a tree with the spine as the trunk, the branches and the leaves as the nerves, and the efferent and afferent nerve endings. And everything happening in the outside world of Maya is interacting with you through your five senses, and your consciousness ultimately becomes diluted within Maya, and you begin to lose the true perception of who you really are, which is the reason why, in the spiritual sense, in the Vedic sense, we say that you are sleeping within this delusion. Although you might think that you're awake, you're ultimately asleep, so long as your Kundalini is sleeping. But once your Kundalini awakes, that's when you also awaken to the delusion around you. Now, the Kundalini is not very easy to awaken and move up, and I'm going to go through some of the Kriya Yoga techniques that are used to activate the Kundalini. But first of all, in the Ramayana, there are three major events which occur that stops Ram and Lakshman and Hanuman. These are three important characters that I'm going to come back to, that find it very, very difficult to battle against Ravan, the ego, to bring Sita, the Kundalini, back from the Shokvatika in Lanka. These are known as the three Granthis, or the three safety mechanisms. Like I said, this Kundalini Shakti is very, very powerful. And if you unleash this power accidentally, apparently some people unleash it accidentally, it will absolutely annihilate you. It will destroy you because it's like letting go of this potential energy with, billions of volts of electricity within you, which accidentally unleashes. It will totally self combust. And you will potentially die, not potentially, you will die from it. So what happens is that nature is very clever, and it created these three safety mechanisms. And within the Ramayana, within Vedic literature even, they're known as the Brahma Granthi, the Vishnu Granthi, and the Rudra Granthi, the three safety mechanisms. Those three safety mechanisms prevent the Kundalini from accidentally rising. Now, the reason why some people say that my Kundalini has accidentally rised and I'm becoming more spiritual, and I am feeling depressed, I'm going through stress and anxiety as a result of this spiritual awakening. There is a little, like I said, there's a little bit of truth within that. And the truth is that it might have awakened as a result of karmic actions from previous lives and certain events that this person or this individual has gone through, in which there are some skaras, their blueprints of past karmic actions encoded within their consciousness deep within, has finally begun to express itself. And one of the reasons why this would happen, particularly more in the age that we live in, is because of the Yuga cycle movements. Now, I've done a webinar on the Yuga cycles and explained that we are currently moving upwards in the Dwapar Yuga. So I think it's somewhere 300 odd many years that we have now ascended or developed through the Dwapar Yuga, which ultimately represents the Yuga in which humanity as a whole will begin to start realizing and discovering very, very subtle energies within the very fabric of creation and also within ourselves. The Vedas say there are around 72 million different types of energies organized like a multinational organization, which ultimately create the whole of creation. And now you're talking about a Kundalini Shakti, which is only a drop of the universal Shakti creating a human being. Now you can imagine from that message that I've just given you that that thing, this Kundalini, cannot just awaken accidentally. So these safety mechanisms, these granthis are there, and it is encoded within the Ramayana by Valmiki as three major events which prevent Hanuman or prevent Ram and Lakshman from ultimately being able to bring Sita back. Now, what happens is here in this slide over here with the different chakras. Now, Sahasra, let me just point this out very quickly, is not a chakra. It is the dynamo of energy that flows, that sits slightly above the head, that flows down into the astral body and through the nadis, the pranic life energy conductors connect to the various centers of consciousness, the various chakras, and Kundalini sits over here in Lanka. Now, Ram, Lakshman, and Hanuman are three very important characters, and these chakra system, these six chakras or six centers of consciousness, are also related to various characters within the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and they're also related to the various different khandas or the chapters of the Ramayana. Now, what happens is, I'm going to try to draw this on the screen over here, that if this is your spine over here, this is the Sushamna. Then at the bottom over here is negative, and at the top over here is positive. And your Kundalini is sitting over here along the Shushabna, where the polarity is negative at the bottom and positive over here. Now, through various breath control techniques which are taught in the Kriya Yoga lessons and the mudras and the pranayamas, you can begin to start activating the Kundalini over here. And this comes through, and you start realizing that you're doing this through the spiritual experiences that you have. So some of the students that come to me, and through my own personal experience, what happens is that you start seeing a golden ring in the spiritual eye when you're meditating. And that golden ring represents the golden ring which Hanuman had shown Sita when he had crossed over from the south of India and into Lanka. and he shows her Ram's golden ring. Ram's golden ring represents the golden outer part of the spiritual eye. It's the beginning of realizing that your spiritual journey and your sadhana is finally beginning to show you some sort of progress. And you should be proud of yourself if that is happening, because you are doing a good job. Although, in the very kind of strict spiritual talk, you shouldn't be feeling anything in terms of being feeling proud, having desire, and yet at the same time having no desire to be able to lift the Kundalini is what the Kriya Yoga practice is all about. So the Kundalini itself comes in various different forms, and I said I'm going to come on to that in my next slide. But in this slide over here, what I want to show is that there are various techniques that begin to activate the Kundalini to move up. So when you practice techniques such as Mahamudra, for example, and Kriya Pranayama, and you're controlling the breath, which is linked to Pran, and the Pran is the link that links to the Kundalini, you start activating this very subtle vibratory sound and light energy at the bottom of the spine. Now, what happens is when you move the Kundalini from the Mooladhara to the Savastidhan, a lot of people become stuck over here in the Savastidhan chakra or the center of consciousness and are unable to move it up to the Manipur chakra. But when you are able to move it up to the Manipur chakra, what happens is that the polarity on the spine then changes from negative at the Muladhara over here and becomes positive on the Manipura over here. And these different centers of consciousness can actually be related to two parts. So this part over here, from here to there, is the upper levels of consciousness. And this part from here to here is the lower centers of consciousness. And your mind is either working collectively at the bottom part or in the upper part. Now, what happens is when you move the Kundalini Shakti up through the Muladhara, Savasthan, and Manipura, and it sits over here, you create what we call the bridge, the Rama Situ bridge between these three chakras. That's the bridge created over here. And when that bridge has been created, the Kundalini comes to this point here, and there is a door here, which is the entrance into the Brahmanadi. And when that happens through the more kind of advanced Kriya Yoga Pranayama techniques, which synchronize the heart chakra related to Hanuman and the Agna chakra related to the universal consciousness or the Kutasa Katyani, what happens is Hanuman, the practice of pranayama, then grabs the Kundalini from over here and pulls her up into the Anahat chakra. And then through your continued practice and your sadhana, it eventually moves up into the Vishuddhi and eventually into Ayodhya or the Agna chakra over here. And it happens as a result of the Pushpak Vimana, which actually is an internal form of a Vayu, which allows you to do that. And there are 49 different types of Vayus that operate within and without. And these Vayus are very specific life energies. And I have done a presentation on that on the Hanuman webinar that I did. So that in a kind of a nutshell is the Kundalini, and there are various different forms of the Kundalini. So here is Sheshnag. So I'm just going to get rid of these drawings so we can see this very beautiful picture of Vishnu and Sheshnag. Now there are different forms of Kundalini. And this Kundalini is not just only mentioned in Vedic literature, it's also mentioned in kind of Egyptian text as well as the kind of emerald tablets of Thoth related to the Atlanteans. And this Kundalini is mentioned in various different scriptures. It's actually even mentioned in the Bible, but that's a different story, and we can do a presentation on that at some point in the future. But what I want to really touch upon here is that a lot of people talk about the Kundalini without really understanding there are different forms of Kundalini. And these different forms of Kundalini have different names. And Sheshnag, these nags represent those different forms of Kundalini. I'm not going to go into the names of those Kundalinis just now because it will take a long time to kind of go into it. But I just want you to understand and I want you to appreciate that Kundalini comes in different forms. So in this picture over here, you can see that there is, grab my spotlight, there's the Ida and the Pingala and the Shushamna, and Sita, or the Kundalini sits at the bottom here. The Ida and the Pingala represent, and the Shushamana represents Dasarath, Ram's father. It represents Dasarath's three queens. And the Shushamana is actually Koshalya, through which the Kundalini and Ram move through to get back to Ayodhya. And they're also represented as a snake. The Shishamna is more an astral spine, but the Ida and the Pingala is more represented as the movement of a snake. And the Kundalini, Sita, is also represented as a snake with 3.5 coils facing downwards. And those 3.5 coils also represent the 3.5 parts of the brain. And what a lot of people might not know listening to the presentation just now is that our brains are developing the new part of the brain known as the neocortex part of the brain. And this part of the brain ultimately it fits in like a jigsaw puzzle when it goes from here to over here. Now, this was one of the reasons why in the Vedas of ancient India, it says that the soul has to go through 8.4 million different types of wombs before it can withstand the power of universal cosmic consciousness or samadhi, because your brain and your spine, which are your true internal kingdoms, this is the real kingdom, this is the real place where the battle happens, the yajna, the brain and the spine are very, very important. And through that is what the Kundalini moves up like a snake. But there are various different forms of Kundalini that can be awakened and that can be, if I can use the word dabbled with. And Sheshnag represents some of those. So that is the end of my presentation. I do hope that you did enjoy it. And if you have any questions, let me know. You can find our posts on Instagram and Facebook. We also have a very small Facebook group. And you can also access our Kriya Yoga lessons as well as keep up to date with our YouTube channel where all of these presentations are uploaded. Thank you very much, and I hope that you are safe and well. Thanks and bye.